The quest is to be liberated from the negative, which is really our own will to nothingness. And once having said yes to the instant, the affirmation is contagious. It bursts into a chain of affirmations that knows no limit. To say yes to one instant is to say yes to all of existence.
Happy heresies and welcome to the desert of the real. Welcome to AM by Gnostic Radio, broadcast at the virtual Alexandria through the God above God that can. This is where you finally find the liberating wisdom of the ancient Gnostics, so relevant today in a world of blurring reality, when all of existence seems like the fake news and alternative facts of hating angels and their servants in the establishment. We shy away from scholarly pontification and definitely stay away from New Age, bromides, and orthodox bromances.
If the only thing keeping a person decent is the expectation of divine reward, then brother, that person is a piece of shit.
Welcome so much with kindness and love, two elements of Gnosis, as Jesus says in the dialogue with the Savior in the Nag Hammadi library. Welcome you spiritual entrepreneurs and modern-day Tom Sawyers, your minds not for rent by any god or government. I am Abraxas in his meat-sack incarnation of Miguel Connor, broadcasting from the lawful but frigid dystopia of Chicago, where certainly there have been many Mothman sightings as of late. So we'll see what's on the tortured horizon. I am your Pompatus of Gnosis, but so are you, as your support, feedback, and company make this revolution of the spirit and the mind so much better.
Before this battle is over, the world will know that few stood against many.
Let's get to the topic and astral guest of the show on this June, the year of our Demiurge 2017. I've just been buried with so many projects, including the new site and the new members platform, and so much else that I hope will make your stay at the virtual Alexandria so much cozier yet loftier. By the jockstrap of Atlas, where has this year gone?
And I thought my jokes were bad.
Anywho, it is truly an honor and pleasure to have back Tao Malachi. He materialized here back when it was coffee, cigarettes, and nooses, about 10 years ago, and his return is like seeing the chariot of Apollo in the sky, pushing away all the chemtrails of delusion and conformity. He discusses in our interview his new book, Gnosis of Guadalupe, A Mystical Path of the Mother. What a book it is, and what an interview it is, as we again explore the divine feminine in a new aspect and countenance.
You no trouble. Me, fifth element. Supreme being.
Tao Malachi is an initiate of the esoteric order Ordo Sanctus Gnosis, and has actively practiced Gnostic Christianity and the Kabbalah for over 30 years. In 1983, Malachi founded the Sophia Fellowship and has served as elder in Tao. For more information on Malachi in the Ecclesia Piste Sophia, please visit sophian.org. Don't forget that members will get Malachi's full interview and another bonus, which I'll tell you about after our first part. Only $5.99 a month for complete episodes in a Pandora's box of more than 350 interviews on the best and brightest in Gnosticism, Western esoterica, and free thought at your sulfur-stained fingertips. And your support really helps keep this red pill cafeteria open. I can't do it without you, and you can assist with some shekels via PayPal or Patreon. which also grants you access to the members section and inner sanctum of Gnosis private Facebook group. All forms of assistance are found at, you got it, thegodabovegod.com.
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Thank you so much for those of you who support and keep the lights of the Pleroma on every week. It's an honor to have you by my side as we continue our eternal battle against the Black Lodge and all of its false works.
Is it about the bunny? No, it's not about the bunny.
Aeon by Gnostic Radio is growing by the thousands each month, so I thought I'd grant any new listeners a quick summary of Gnosticism from a source which we will actually discuss in our next show when we deal with Dark City, The Matrix, Vanilla Sky, and other Gnostic flicks. It's from Roelof van den Broek, from his work entitled Gnosticism. He explains that the Gnostic religion is understood as a phenomenon that flourished in the great myths of the 2nd and 3rd century, which spread across the Middle East and Roman Empire, up to the Far East. Van den Broek enumerates 4 typical features of Gnosticism. Here they are. 1. A distinction is made between the highest unknown God and the imperfect or plainly evil creator God, who is often identified with the God of the Bible.
God! Bing, 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 bing. Well, it was nice to meet you, God. Thank you for the Grand Canyon, and good luck with the apocalypse. Oh, and by the way, you suck!
2. This is often connected with an extensive description of the divine world, or pleroma, from which the essential core of human beings derives, and of a disastrous fall of a divine being, Sophia or wisdom, in this upper world. 3. As a result, humankind has become entrapped in the earthly condition of oblivion and death, from which it is saved by the revelation of Gnosis by one or more heavenly messengers. 4. Salvation is often actualized and celebrated in rituals that are performed within the Gnostic community. Or we can take the simple definition of Andrew Philip Smith from his book, John the Baptist and the Gnostics. It goes, stuff like what the ancient Gnostics used to do.
We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no great war. No Great Depression. Our great war is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives.
I should mention that an important component of Gnosticism, and certainly Gnosis, is gratitude. And you can certainly find it aplenty in the Nag Hammadi library and Hermetic texts. In many hymns and prayers, even in the surliest Sethian gospel. The truth of this universe is horror. But this also comes with awe, for there is a knowledge of higher realities, and that something can be done to rescue the light from the darkness of mere being. There's no reason one can't hold awe and horror at the same time in one's mind, and they're probably overlapping feelings when you think about it.
If the world that we are forced to accept is false and nothing is true, then everything is possible.
On the way to discovering what we love, we will find everything we hate, everything that blocks our path to what we desire.
Let us end with the prayer of thanksgiving from the Nag Hammadi library. And then led us to an unforgettable and immersive interview with Tao Malachi on his book, Gnosis of Guadalupe. We give thanks to you. Every soul and heart is lifted up to you. Undisturbed name, honored with the name, quote, God, and praised with the name, quote, Father. For to everyone and everything comes the fatherly kindness and affection of love, and any teaching there may be that is sweet and plain, giving us mind, speech, and knowledge. Mind, so that we may understand you. Speech, so that we may expound you. Knowledge, so that we may know you. We rejoice, having been illuminated by your knowledge. We rejoice because you have shown us yourself. We rejoice because while we are in the body, you have made us divine through your knowledge.
Eternity isn't some later time. Eternity isn't a long time. Eternity has nothing to do with time. Eternity is that dimension of here and now, which thinking in time cuts out.
This is it.
This is it.
This is my...
If you don't get it here, you won't get it anywhere. And the experience of eternity right here and now is the function of life. There's a wonderful formula that the Buddhists have for the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva, the one whose being, sattva, is illumination, Bodhi, who realizes his identity with eternity and at the same time his participation in time. And the attitude is not to withdraw from the world when you realize how horrible it is, but to realize that this horror is simply the foreground of a wonder. And come back and participate in it. All life is sorrowful, is the first Buddhist saying, and it is. It wouldn't be life if there were not temporality involved, which is sorrow, loss, loss, loss.
That's a pessimistic note.
Well, I mean, you gotta say yes to it and say it's great this way. I mean, it's the way God intended it.
This is the Aeon Byte interview, and with us we definitely have the pleasure of being joined by Tao Malachi to discuss his book, Gnosis of Guadalupe, A Mystical Path of the Mother. How are you doing today, Malachi?
I'm doing well, and yourself, Miguel?
I'm doing good, and again, thanks for being here. I think it's been over 10 years since you joined the show. I hope you're a lot wiser than I am in 10 years. I think I've gained a little Sophia in all that time. How about you?
Oh, well, I hope I've grown. Otherwise, I'm spiritually dead. Yeah. Growth is life.
Yes, it is, unless there's some sort of suspension.
Yeah, thank you for having me on your show again.
Oh, great to have you on. So, for the listener that might not be familiar with your work, and again, since it's been over 10 years since you last graced the show, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, my life very much has been wrapped up in spirituality. As a little boy, I was very captured going to Sunday school and hearing about these prophets and holy people and these conversations with God and these people who moved with the power of God and so on. And a question kind of rose in my heart of, where are they? You know, where is this power? Where are these people? And I was very prone to dream and vision as a little boy. But this stirred something in me of this question of, well, where is this? And I didn't have the vocabulary for it at the time, but, well, where is a spirituality of direct experience? Where is this communion with God? Where is this enlightenment? So that was very much stirring in me. And I met my spiritual teacher, thanks be to Mother, when I was 8, and started being taught and initiated into Sophian Gnosticism, which is a tradition deeply rooted in a Christian Kabbalah with strong roots in Judaic Kabbalah. So I got introduced early on to a mystical spirituality that started answering those questions for me. And I was with my teacher for 8 years before he died. And before he died, he gave me a blessing to carry on lineage after him. Of course, I was still pretty young. And as a young man, I was very inclined to pursue mysticism and magic everywhere I could find it. You know, people who are engaged in alternative spiritualities, people who are engaged in mystical spirituality, folks who are engaged in occultism, Western esotericism, very much just wishing to take in what was happening. And at the same time, continue to work on my interior life, my own prayer, meditation, my own process of realization. I began to teach others in 1983. I was 21 at the time, and would teach in a very indirect way, not really directly our lineage, because I had this feeling of really needing to unfold the things I had learned. And that took some years. So after an experience in the desert in 93, 10 years after starting, where much of this came to fruition, and I had an experience that put the lineage and the teachings in a new context, a very different context. It was only after that that I began to actually teach and initiate inside our lineage and tradition, Sophian Gnosticism. And from there, since then, along with our circle here, we have generated an extended Gnostic community that has become international, and that we now have gatherings in other countries.
And it is interesting because many assume that the interest in Gnosticism started with in the late 90s with the Da Vinci Code, the Matrix, the sort of the rise in neo-paganism and so forth. But again, you've been doing this since the 80s from an older lineage, right?
Yes, and there were people who began modern Gnostic movements before I came into the picture. So the teachings of Gnosticism, and certainly Kabbalah, are long before that.
Indeed, they are. I mean, you've got the Ecclesia Gnostica and some others that are around. Yeah, and a lot of these have been around from the 19th century French revival. Would you say your line is from that, for the listener that might not know?
The particular Tao who revolutionized our lineage, Tao Miriam, a British woman, had her experience of supernal realization in the mid-1880s, late 19th century. And that's where our lineage really comes from, is from her. She had received a Gnostic lineage, but as she worked with it more and more, while it spoke about the divine and sacred feminine, she was looking and, well, I'm not feeling it. There's something more that needs to be brought forth. So she very much pushed in her interior life and entered into this experience of a supernal consciousness. And from that realization began to reweave the entire lineage, which is what I received through Tao Elijah, my spiritual teacher.
Before we get into your book, or actually we are getting into your book, before we get into Our Lady of Guadalupe, this early passage stayed with me all throughout your book, and it goes, "Gnosis alone can transmute anxiety and alienation." What does that mean? It's kind of a warning, Malachi.
Well, or an affirmation. We could also say Gnosis alone will transform you and heal your life. But we have to ask what Gnosis means. Gnosis means knowledge, but not in the sense of intellectual information. Gnosis means an enlightenment experience. Gnosis means an experience of an integral self-realization. Gnosis means an inner knowing through direct spiritual and mystical experience. And if I wish to put it in a very simple way, so many of us walk around here feeling so separate from others, so separate from our environment, the universe, God, hence the word alienation. We feel alienated. We feel alone, lonely. But this inner knowing, this has to do with beginning to become aware that God is with us. To begin to become aware that God is within everything. That in each moment, we have this communion, we have this exchange of energy. Why the anxiety? Why the angst of unenlightened society? Feeling cut off, feeling separate, feeling very vulnerable, so on. So this principle of Gnosis, or in Kabbalah would be called Deat, which is a Hebrew word for knowledge also. This inner knowing, this presence of awareness, where we can begin to become aware of how interconnected we are with one another, with our environment, and with its source, which, of course, we use the word God to speak of. So in this sense, that is the healing of anxiety, of the alienation, where again we are connected, where again we remember our origin.
And that's very interesting because people ask me, well, sometimes, or at least in my experience, when I have had gnosis, when I am awakening and so forth, I also feel in a way even more alienated. I feel it's paradoxical. I feel connected, but I feel alienated because I feel it's almost like terror and awe at the universe are one and the same. And I feel a little bit more distant from people because I am no longer really in the world. I'm on a different level. Do you feel that way, or does it happen with people?
Well, this, in certain parts of my journey, I certainly did. Very set apart, very alienated. As a young man, and certainly walking with my teacher, a lot of my feelings oftentimes was like, I'm an alien here. I don't belong on this planet.
Exactly.
I don't fit in, So it was definitely had those feelings. Over time, though, in this process of the Gnostic experience, this awakening experience, and remembering nature of soul, mind, consciousness, and the awareness of inseparable from its source. Well, this is true of all beings, of everybody. And we are all siblings. We're deeply connected. So, yes, walking in the world, there are certainly on the human level, sometimes kind of like, wow, we can be really different here. And wow, sometimes I don't get what's going on here. Yes. But there's another dimension of, and this is the journey that we are all on. And there is God in this one. There is a divine spark in this one and in that one. Even if I were looking at a demon, there's a divine spark in that. And this is that healing in which there is this larger vision of what's transpiring. A lot of times we're looking from our perspective in the world versus the perspective of light continuum or heaven. Even the perspective of one life versus many, many lives. So in the process of Gnosis, there is this growing inner knowing of a larger vision that does begin to reveal that there's a place for everything and everyone, even in those moments of great error, and that there's a great interdependence and interconnection between all beings. I mean, the universe is composed of individuals. If you remove all individuals, you have no universe. And the universe is the environment of individuals. So there is this sacred unity underlying. And this is what we need to realize, recognize and realize. And in this, that alienation gets healed. in which all of a sudden, oh, this is okay. If I'm feeling alienated, oh, maybe I'm encountering a soul that in the moment is suffering, or maybe I'm encountering a soul that has forgotten its origin. I hope this is making some sense.
Oh, it's very well said, Malachi. I couldn't agree more. I mean, as I tell people, and you just hit on it, sometimes when we awakened or we are awakening, there is that sense of alienation. And sometimes we see the world, we start realizing how much we have suffered through, as you said, our lifetimes, but how others are suffering. And I tell people, well, it's time to have gratitude because now you can do something about it because you see the suffering in others.
Yes, exactly. Now one can take a role of a conscious co-creator, a conscious agent of gnosis, of an enlightenment, of light, and see how, in one's own life, as one is called, one can uplift others and facilitate the relief of suffering in others. I suppose it would be called a grassroots movement. When you watch the difficulties and darkness in the world, what's needed is the grassroots movement of many people in all the ways that they can, taking the gnosis they have received and put it into action. Because, really peak experiences in consciousness, that's the easy part. Embodying the truth and light revealed and enacting it, that's the work.
Well said, well said. So why don't we go to the book? And I feel a lot of what we've spoken will be found in the book, especially in the story, and that is of Juan Diego and his encounter with Our Lady of Guadalupe. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as the story goes, Juan Diego is out early in the morning, in the wee hours of the morning, because he is on his way to tend to spiritual essence and tend to sacred tests. And the time in which he's living is a very delicate moment of peace between Aztec peoples and the Spaniards. They've been living through a genocide. And for the Aztec peoples, their own society had entered into struggles before the Spanish came, so it's been a really hard time for the people, for the ordinary people. And there he is, this faithful person who studies the way of ancient wisdom of the Aztecs, also is participating in this new faith brought to them, these other elements of spirituality, and really laboring to integrate in a very confusing time amidst his people. And he's out in the morning on this track, and as he passes a certain hill that used to be a hill upon which there was a temple to Earth Mother for the Aztec people, Titicaca. And as he's passing along to the west of it, all of a sudden he's hearing bird song, but it's not bird song. It's something celestial, something enchanting, something heavenly. And he's listening, and he's listening, and in the moment, he just has this question in his heart. Whoa, what have I done to deserve this? And to be so fortunate? Am I imagining this? Is this a dream? Should I awaken from the dream? Or is this the place my ancestors spoke of? And this is what's swirling in his heart as he hears this. And he continues for a time, and then all of a sudden it stops, and there's this very profound silence and stillness. And he hears a voice calling to him, calling him by name. Like a mother to a child to a mother. And so he goes up the hill. And it's very interesting. In the story, he's not frightened, he's not startled, he's not surprised at all. One almost feels like the mission he set out upon is some sort of vision quest or something. And here's the answer very early on. And he goes up, very eager to come into the presence that is on this hill. And when he comes up there is this celestial maiden. There's this holy mother, holy bride, radiant with glory as though robes formed of sunlight. The entire environment all of a sudden isn't like in the world. This is happening in December 9th, very close to winter solstice, one could say, in the midst of winter kind of environment. But everything is very alive on the hill, radiant with glory. It's as though he stepped out of the world into heaven. And of course, he falls down at the feet of this presence of the Holy Mother Bride, and honors her and listens, and she begins to engage in a revelation to him and begins to give him an action, a mission, in which she's sending him to the bishop of the area to speak for her and announce her and let the bishop know that she wishes a sanctuary built to her on that very spot. One would also have to know that the bishop to which he's sending her was part of this drawing, the Aztec temple that used to be there on that spot. So what she's asking of this individual is really, really wild. And he's there, he listens to her, he receives her word, and he bows down again before her because he's come up and stood up as they've talked, and he vows, yes, I will go and do this thing. You know, talk about a warrior spirit. Well, I'm going into a den of lions or maybe the cave of a dragon.
No kidding, yeah.
But he goes. And down the mountain he goes, and off he goes, and he goes to visit the bishop. And he's made to wait a very long time, of course, because, ironically, this isn't a nobleman, this isn't a wealthy person, this is a peasant, this is a poor person, who just so happens to be very faithful from the ancient tradition as well as in the sense of this new tradition presented to him. And eventually the bishop agrees to see him. And the bishop listens to him and is kind. But when Juan Diego is done explaining his experience, he's very surprised on a certain level because the bishop seems to completely disregard it. And part of him may have expected this. The other part was thinking, wow, but who could deny this? So the bishop basically says, I need to consider this. Go away and come back, and I will tell you what I think. So off goes Juan Diego. And he returns to Tepeyac and Guadalupe, Tenantzin in Neal is the name of Guadalupe. And he speaks to her, and in part, in his speaking to her, he lets her know, well, Holy Mother, Celestial Maiden, Sky Dancing One, I'm a peasant. You probably should send a nobleman. Someone with name, with worth that a bishop would listen to. And essentially she responds, oh no, I'm sending you. And I have a reason. Because I come for you and people like you. I come for everybody. I'm here for the most common person. I am your mother. I am their mother. No, you will do this. And now, you go back and finish this work. Finish this mission. Go back to the bishop. So he agrees. He says, I will go back in the morning, and I will speak to him again. So Juan Diego does this. He speaks to the bishop again. I mean, and he's in tears. He's humble. He's speaking of this in awe and wonder. And at this point, of course, the bishop, he is beginning to wonder about this. He's wondering if this is a heretic or a man who's gone crazy.
Yeah.
So he says to this fellow, you know, I can't go building some temple to the alleged Virgin Mary on your word on the mountain. No, I need a sign. Yes, bring me a sign. And Juan Diego goes, yes, Your Reverence. Okay. I will go and speak to her again. Well, because the bishop is questioning him, of course, he sends servants, probably officers of the Inquisition, to follow him and see anyone he talks to, because he's wondering about him and wondering what's happening. So Juan Diego goes on his way, and he's really oblivious that he's being followed. And at a certain point in the journey, according to this story, he crosses this bridge, and the people following him all of a sudden can't see him. Don't know where he's gone, can't follow him, and they turn back. And Juan Diego doesn't know anything about this, by the way. He just goes on. And they go back, and they bear an evil report, and questioning, and thinking, indeed, this is some sort of heretic or something. And we have to understand, in the time, anyone who wasn't submitting to Spain and the Roman Catholic Church, I mean, Aztecs, Toltec people, would be dead. So off he goes, and he goes back and tells the Holy Mother what has transpired. And she promises a sign, and she sends him on the way, saying, you will go back again tomorrow. And off he goes. Well, what he encounters is a relative, an uncle who is dying. In Hualan Toltec language, to say uncle might infer that this is his spiritual mentor. The person who's been teaching him the ancient ways is dying, where no healing has happened, and so on. And so, come the morning, the uncle asks him to fetch him one of the priests for end-of-life spiritual works. And of course, in Juan Diego's heart, this takes precedence. He's like, but this is my uncle. This is my spiritual mentor. I have to go do this. So he goes. And to do this, he has to go along the same path, except when he comes towards Titicaca, it dawns on him, well, if I go by that path over there, to the west side, the celestial maiden will see me and call me up, and there will be this promise, so I'll go around the back. This is kind of comical. The thought, you're going to escape the all-seeing maiden, the Holy Mother, by going around the backside of the mountain.
Yeah.
So there he goes, however. and it's really a lovely moment in the story, because she doesn't call him up. She goes down the mountain to see him. And she doesn't visit him with judgment, wrath, anything. Just the sweetness. Hey, Juan, what are you doing? Where are you going? What's happening? And there he is, and this is the first time in her presence that he's frightened. Because he knows he's not doing what she wants, and he has this situation, and he confesses, hey, I'm bringing trouble to you. I'm sorry. But here's what's happening, my uncle there is dying, and I'm going to do this. And as soon as I do that, I'll fulfill this action. And she just is so sweet with him. And what she says, she's like, oh, do you not know who I am? I am who am your mother am here. And she goes on, even saying, do you not know you're in the folds of my garment? And she goes on, do you not know I know what's happening? And I will protect you. I will bring healing. And so on. And she lets Juan Diego know that his uncle's just fine. And that now he needs to be about this mission that she's given him. And at this point she tells him, the sign for the bishop, it's up on the hill. Spanish essence flowers, of course, would be a new word for roses, which were not a native plant. And she sends him up the mountain, telling him to collect them and bring them to her. So he goes. And when she's up on the mountain, he's hit by this heavenly fragrance and all of these Spanish essence flowers. And he collects every one of them and puts them in his huadl, which is his caper cloak, and bundles them. And then down the hill he goes, presents them to Guadalupe, and she opens it, blesses them, sets her image in this huadl, this caper cloak, binds it up and sends it to the bishop through him, saying to him, don't show anybody. Well, he gets down there. Again, he's made to wait a long time, particularly now. And the guards are, in that long time, really wondering what he's holding, because they can smell something. They see it's important. He tries to keep his head down, and at a certain point he realizes as time goes on, if he doesn't flash something of what's in there to them, they're going to take it from him by force. And this is going to prevent him to fulfill his word and mission, even though she said, don't show anybody. So he flashes them a glimpse, and the minute they get that, they behold something of the image in the flowers, and one of them swiftly goes in and lets the bishop know what they've seen. And the bishop tells them to immediately let him in. And so Juan Diego goes in to see the bishop, and bows before him, gives all salutations, and tells the story of what's there in his hands, and then opens it. The flowers, all of these roses, so prized to the Spanish, falling out on the floor in the middle of winter, with this piece of cloth upon which the image of the celestial maiden is emblazoned. And after this, of course, Juan Diego returns to Guadalupe and is blessed and sealed by her. And that's the essence of this story.
It's a wonderful story, and for the listener, Malachi really goes in depth. And again, it's a beautiful story, very inspiring. So what do you say? I mean, there's so much that we could unpack from this story. What struck me is that the story of Juan Diego, like other people who are touched by the divine or, again, find a sacred quest they must go into, is that he second-guesses himself about the vision. And, of course, I've been there. I experienced something. I have a deep experience. And then my ego kicks in and I start going, well, maybe I'm delusional. Maybe this never happened. And a lot of times in my life, I just don't go down that quest. I mean, so what do you say do you feel this is part of it? And how can we in our lives understand when it's something deeper and not just our ego trying to trick us?
Well, first, with Juan Diego, there seems to be this profound sense of spiritual humility. But it also seems to be joined with a profound spiritual self-worth. Because he is keeping his faith in the midst of a very difficult time, and he's bold in his faith, clearly, and yet he has this humility where he's not sure he's the right one. where he does have questions in himself. But there's also an interesting teaching when he says, what have I done to deserve this? How am I so fortunate? Am I imagining this? Am I dreaming? This is an interesting spiritual practice. Something similar actually occurs often with the prophets of ancient Israel. They will have a vision, and in the midst of recounting it, they will say, I saw something like, boom, boom, boom. I saw something like. In other words, not grasping at the vision and saying it's exactly this or exactly that, but space for the movement of the Spirit, and space for interpretation, and space to walk with a question of indeed, what does this mean and what is right action? Also, particularly in our times, to not think reality is so linear, that everything is as it seems, but walking with that question. So he's walking with that question of a more fluid self. Am I this? Am I that? Maybe I'm neither. What is this? There's a certain peace in that, and there's a certain openness and sensitivity to the Spirit in this. And it is true. In the midst of dreams, visions, we have every reason to question what's being stirred in us. You know, am I getting puffed up? Is it my ego? Or is there something deeper being stirred? My heart being opened, my mind being opened. And in terms of dreams and visions or calls, how will this be embodied? How does this change me? How does this become good works and action that really is for other people? So there's really a swirl of that in his spiritual humility, of this profound training he's had on receiving dream, on receiving vision, on looking at reality. But we have to remember he's a shaman's apprentice. He's in the shamanic path. So dream, vision, material reality, afterlife are very much a swirl for him. So he's often questioning.
Yeah, it reminds me, I think the perennial story would be the book of Jonah in the Old Testament. You mentioned the prophets. He kept having visions from God, and he kept stubbornly pushing him away. And he had to be dragged kicking and screaming on his mission. So sometimes that happens.
And afterwards, he's still not so happy about it.
Yes, we humans are curious species, huh?
We can get confused sometimes.
I agree. And I think you would probably agree when we have those visions or those pulls, sometimes just the usual formula works. A lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, and talk to somebody who might be wiser and just bounce off these ideas before you go into some action.
Well, I think that's part of spiritual community and spiritual friendships, and why in a mystical spirituality they're so important. They help generate context. Per the story, Juan Diego did have spiritual community, and others he could talk with if he had need. So this is very important, communicating with others. And in the story, having a tradition that we follow that helps us put our dreams and our visions and our peak experiences in consciousness into some context and giving us a language for it. Because this one clearly has a language for what he's experiencing as he encounters that experience.
And as for yourself, why did you decide to write this book? I mean, you've written about what might be called very esoteric topics or esoteric Christianity. You've written books on the Gospel of Thomas, Mary Magdalene, the Cosmic Christ. Of course, like you said, there's a Kabbalistic angle or there's a Kabbalistic narrative to everything you've written. But Our Lady of Guadalupe might seem more orthodox. Why did you decide to write this book, Malachi?
Well, I kind of got tagged by Guadalupe when I was a teenager. I started getting these visions and dream of Guadalupe. A very young teenager, about 13, 14. And at first I really didn't know anything about Guadalupe, and seeing this particular image of Holy Mother Bride, I was very used to experiences with Magdalene, the Holy Mother more directly, not this particular emanation. So it captured me, and eventually I had an experience where I found out the name for the one I was seeing and what I was experiencing. And this went on for years, devotionally in my life. In all spaces I would discourse in for many, many years, I would always have an image of Guadalupe, but I never talked about it with friends. It was very private, and the funny thing is no one ever asked me, why do you have that particular image in the room all the time? No one. And there was a large transition in our community to a new sanctuary house some 9 years ago. And there's this big movement going on inside me with Guadalupe. And a friend of mine brought to me this book by John Many, The Aztec Virgin. And I started reading this book, and the story told in our book is from by his permission. He was kind enough to let us use it and let us work strongly off his work. And I started reading this book, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this is how I experience." But his emphasis was on the Aztec tradition. And of course, I work as a Christian Gnostic, and I'm seeing very much the Christian side of it, and the Christian mysticism. Also seeing how important for Christianity and Christian mystics to really include the earth and nature and their spirituality, and not just be removed to have it, and that view. So this stirred to the writing of the mystical path of Guadalupe, or Gnosis of Guadalupe, and wanting to share, here is a path completely in the divine and sacred feminine, and in Christian Gnosticism, one that's very shamanic, that restores a communion with nature, with environment, connectedness. This needs to be shared, and this motivated me. So I started sharing the practices privately I'd been doing it. I'm sharing the story woven from several Aztec elders that John Many wrote, and working off of that to share this vehicle.
So you would say, Malachi, that I think the Virgin Mary and even Sophian Gnostic tradition is more transcendental. So Our Lady of Guadalupe, you would say, is, I don't want to say more approachable, but like I say, she is more connected to the earth, to more of the, like you said, she's not so much a goddess, she's a mother, she's the giver of life on this planet.
Well, I would say two things. First, in terms of Sophia, or as Kabbalah would say, Shekhinah, there's interior and exterior. And there are aspects that are very much of this world, both in Gnosticism and Kabbalah. But what's very unique in Guadalupe is that she joins the transcendental and the eminent. She joins the mother and bride. There's a particular fullness of mother and bride inside her revelation. And that's what captured me. As though you took Magdalene and Mother Mary and joined those energies. That's in Guadalupe. But also her revelation in the midst of an apocalyptic time for the people, and for both peoples that were colliding. A very dark time. And here is this vision of a woman of light who gives a prophecy of an age of bursting forth into bloom. A prophecy, we would say, of second coming, not in the sense of a return of a single individual, but rather a bursting forth of God consciousness in human beings. If this is making some sense.
Oh, yeah, it makes perfect sense. I've seen the shrine, but I was young. I was living in Mexico. I don't remember. I have been many times to Fatima in my life because my hometown is Lisbon and the energy there is beautiful. I don't remember Our Lady of Guadalupe so much. I know my wife is Catholic and she's very devoted to her. She's been down there and she talks about, you know, how everything is preserved and all this wonderful stuff. But what struck me is that iconography is very much like a womb, don't you think?
Isn't it, though? Yes, it is. And it's a principle of being very much in the mother. Mother, in our tradition, father generally is talking about the transcendental aspect of God. And mother's talking about the eminent aspect. And we're always talking about one God, transcendent and immanent. And the mother is everything that's revealed to us of God. And the mother's this profound awareness that we live and move and have our being in God and have never been separate from God, save in our thinking, save in our hearts. But that separation's an illusion. It's not true. It's not real. And in the sense of mother's womb, mother's heart womb. It's very interesting. Very frequently in teaching, we will interpret our physical body as a virtual extension of the womb.
Oh.
And we are walking in this world until the time of our birth, which many here would call death, in which the body itself is the womb of the mother giving birth to our soul, to the pleroma of light, the evident and eternal. So this idea of womb, it's kind of like everybody can be so fixated on the cross. What about the empty tomb, which is a symbol of, well, a womb?
Wow, yes.
But this very much is the message of Guadalupe. Wow, you feel like you're in such a dark time, but I tell you, you can emerge from this victorious. You can emerge from this blessed. You can emerge from this awakened.
Well said. Very well said. And have you had a chance to make a pilgrimage down there, Malachi?
No, and I don't think I ever will.
Mm.
I very much enjoy the mother in spirit. I very much enjoy the mother as a principle of everywhere. In mother, sitting here in my living room or being in the chapel at Tipiacac, they're one place, Holy Land. Also, I will confess, I'm a little bit of a rebel against orthodoxy and orthodox spaces, and okay, I have my aversions. So here is good.
Makes sense. I mean, I know Carl Jung was always fascinated with the Catholic Church, saw it as a one place you can get an inner alchemical experience, and he never made it to Rome. I think he passed out before he got on a train and said, "No, I think here in Switzerland I'll do my alchemy here in Switzerland, and that's fine." So.
Yes.
In one section of your book, Gnosis of Guadalupe, you speak of being a dream warrior. What exactly is that, Malachi?
Oh, well, this is very connected with being a prayer warrior. The idea of walking in peace, but inwardly having prayers with regards to spiritual forces and shifting the matrix and the energy dimension. And of course, dreams. Dreams are very much a time of revelation of energy dimension for us. Kabbalah would say dream is 1/60th the power of death, but in dream we learn about these interior realms in afterlife. And in a shamanic way, dream isn't less real than here. It's just a reality in a different dimension, in a different dimension of consciousness. And this is a dimension of consciousness, this waking life, this incarnation, dream, another, afterlife, another. So the idea of a dream warrior is beginning to look at dream as having a greater power, a greater possibility of communion, of learning to enter into sleep and enter into dream to perhaps become more lucid, to perhaps generate more luminous dreams. Also, perhaps to be able to take action in dream on a conscious level, understanding that dream, generally speaking for us, is astral plane, astral dimension. Sometimes spiritual, perhaps, sometimes supernal for some, but for most of us, astral. And that's the reality within and behind, and that's where we're touching into the spirit world. And we're touching into a matrix of spiritual forces moving within and behind everything that's transpiring here. And if we want to make shifts, then awakening in dream more and acting in dream more, we may be able to make it on an astral, on the spiritual level, and maybe affect some things that transpire here. Am I making some sort of sense with this?
Oh, perfect sense.
Capitalizing it.
No. I mean, it's hearkening back to the Gnostic Neoplatonists of the ascension to the heavens and the stars to gain that grace, that energy from higher places, and utilize it here, not to change our material world, but to change ourselves and heal others. That's basically it, right?
Yes. And, St. Paul gives us a really beautiful key in his letter to the Ephesians. He says this wild thing. He says, our battle's not against blood and flesh. It's not against one another. It's against spiritual forces rooted in celestial places. We may say inner dimensions.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And for a Gnostic, of course, we want to be prayer warriors in this way and dream warriors. So we want these practices for union with the divine in dream, for lucid dream, luminous dream, to also have engagements in dream time while we have engagements here in prayer. Not with regards to people, blood and flesh, but all these influences that we're subject to and that frequently take people over. We can sit and watch this swirl in various ideologies and various things that take off in the world where sometimes you're looking and you're like, oh my gosh, are people going crazy? What's this? And here's this influence, and it's an obvious power. And you're like, oh my, there's something energetic and unseen behind this. And this is just the surface. There's something more. And certainly for a Gnostic, certainly for a mystic, we seek to engage in the energetic dimension. And that's what a dream warrior is. And that's what a prayer warrior is. I'm realizing through prayer, through meditation, through sacred ceremony, and through our actions in daily lives, we can make a difference.
And by difference, I mean, sometimes we get a little idealistic, and I know I get that way. But a difference can be something small, helping the least of our brothers down the street or something like that. We don't have to bring down an evil empire or anything like that.
Well, as soon as you bring down one evil empire in this world, another seems to arise.
Oh, yes, it's so true.
Apparently that's not quite the answer. But if we can uplift one soul, that's a great thing. If we can uplift two, that's a great thing. If we can uplift more, that's a great thing. Your point's very well made. It's not some grandiose idea of, we're going to change all this. That's not quite the vision. It's in the middle of all this. How many can we uplift? What sorrow suffering can we relieve? With how many can we engage in a light transmission and an energetic transmission that sets them in the way? It's a very different idea of engaging those who are around me. Now imagine that more of us do this, and more of us do this, and more of us do this. The collective changes through individuals. So first we must bring the change in ourselves. Help some others around ourselves bring the change and expand from there. And that's the vision.
Well said. I think that's all the time we have today, Malachi. I'd like to thank you very much for coming on Aeon Byte and discussing Gnosis of Guadalupe, a mystical path of the Mother.
Thank you for having me.
And there you have it, oh you Truthseeker warriors. The first part of our interview with Tao Malachi. Focus on his latest book, The Gnosis of Guadalupe. Release the kraken of your gnosis by joining our member section at thegodabovegod.com and get the rest, where Malachi discusses actual rituals from the Guadalupe tradition, Kabbalah and the Divine Feminine, and what can a person do spiritually in these tenuous times, in this current geopolitical world. And there's more, oh yes, because I've included our first ever interview. Thus, we deal with Tao Malachi's first ever interview many moons ago, where he really gets deep into the Sophian tradition, his church, the Ecclesia Piste Sophia, and his take on ancient Gnosticism, and how it helps us in a modern context. It's a restored audio quality, but my lack of knowledge back then couldn't be restored. But Malachi brought down the pleroma with his sapience. Check it out, and check out a mundane reality for a spell or two. And don't forget, write your own gospel, live your own myth.